Greetings and welcome to the fifth and final episode of the RIMS Bermuda 2020 webinar series presented by RIMS and the Bermuda Business Development Agency. This session is titled Insurtech and Innovation. This session will be hosted and moderated by Jasmine DeSilva, Business Development Manager of Risk and Insurance Solutions for the BDA, and she will be joined by an esteemed panel whom she will introduce shortly. I am Justin Smallison, Business Content Manager here at RIMS, the Risk and Insurance Management Society. A few notes before we begin. If you have a question for our presenters during today's session, please submit them by writing in the question box, not the chat box. Feel free to ask at any point in the presentation, and we will reserve time for Q&A. Following this session, the recording will be available on Opus Ed and Risk Knowledge, the RIMS online content library. All downloads and related contact information will be accessible to the sponsors. On to today's session. Bermuda's reinsurance market is embracing innovation and investing in emerging technologies to improve processes and customer delivery. This session will explore the outlook for the sector and how new technology and tools are poised to disrupt the industry. RIMS and the BDA are thrilled to be joined by a large global audience. Welcome all. BDA Business Development Manager Jasmine DeSilva will introduce our panelists and begin the discussion.
Thank you, Justin. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the fifth and final episode of the RIMS Bermuda webinar series. Over the past 5 weeks, we've looked at the changing landscape of risk management, discussed key trends and issues, and shown how Bermuda is uniquely positioned to address them. It's only right that this being our final episode that we focus on the future with a discussion on Insurtech and Innovation. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome my panelists today. We have Jonathan Prinn. He is Managing Director at BGC Partners. Jonathan has over 30 years experience in the industry and is a specialist in the placement and broking space. His current focus is on creating a digital broker for the insurance part of the BGC business. Next, we have Susan Pateras. She's Chief Operating Officer at Liberty Specialty Markets and a BDA board member. Susan has more than 2 decades of experience working in London, New York, and Bermuda. At LSM, she is responsible for driving business development, strategic initiatives, and operational change across the organization. Next, George Alayon. He is the Assistant Director of Insurance Supervision at the Bermuda Monetary Authority. George is responsible for advancing the BMA's innovative insurer strategies and has an active role in reviewing license applications for the BMA's Insurtech initiatives. And last but not least, we have Peter Dunlop. He is a partner at Walker's Bermuda and co-lead of the insurance and reinsurance team. Pete is a former underwriter and has many years of experience advising clients on a number of issues, including insurance company formations, licensing, new product advice, and Insurtech. Thank you all for being here with me today. I think we all can agree, both the panelists and those that are listening, that when it comes to the incorporation of technology, the insurance industry has somewhat of a delayed start. And I think the pace of change can be a challenge for numerous reasons. And part of that is the need to have a strong regulatory environment. However, it would seem that we are somewhat at a pivotal inflection point. As I sit at home, month 4 of working remotely, it's definitely seen that the measures that have been put in place to mitigate the spread of COVID-19 can also serve as a catalyst for the industry. And I, for one, am incredibly interested to see how this influences the conversations around technology advancements and initiatives. But firstly, let's start by getting a general overview and understanding of where the industry is at. JP, from your perspective, what has been the impact of Insurtech on the industry at large? JP, we're going to need you to unmute.
Sorry, thank you. I think this is a super exciting space, but personally, I suspect that we haven't seen enough of an impact yet. We've moved a long way from the sort of the age of the dot-coms and things like that, and I think that's important. The Insurtech fintech space is now full of diversity of thought. I think it's great that we're moving away from fintechs or insurtechs, which were heavily focused on distribution. They're now much more focused on many different aspects: data, modeling, workflow, underwriting, algorithms, processing, document creation. So I think that's exciting. But I'd agree with you that the the proof of concept of that COVID-19 has provided us, that tragedy, if there's any sort of silver lining, it has to be for our industry that it's poured, petrol on the sort of the slow burn of digitalization in this space. I think pre and post COVID, there's going to be a significant difference, which you've alluded to. Look, I think it's a great shame that our industry needs a disaster to sort of make the change. I wish we could have made some of the changes ourselves. And I think there are going to be two camps going forward in the Insurtech sort of space. Those that are funded and are active and are working well, I suspect will continue that way. Those that are had a more difficult time, I think it's going to be an anxious moment for them. I think funding, second round funding, is going to be much more difficult. I suspect the bar is getting higher and higher. But I think it was Jack Welch, wasn't it, who said that change, there's opportunity, and it's whether or not you sort of get energized around that or whether you're paralyzed by it. And certainly COVID has brought forward an enormous amount of potential change by driving us through this proof of concept. I mean, very simply, no one's done a face-to-face trade for 3 or 4 months, and the sky's not fallen in. Surprise, surprise. If you'd suggested that 3 or 4 months ago, it would have been horrific. I think there are some significant sort of threats to come, but that's all proven by success. The minute our industry has a habit of changing, the minute somebody wins a new client by a new process, or a carrier does something different via new insights, then people tend to move in that direction. And I hope that the impact insurtechs and fintechs have on our industry will only increase in the coming months and years.
Excellent points. Thank you, JP. And Susan, I'm going to turn to you and just to focus on Bermuda more specifically. What's your take, and what role does innovation have in the Bermuda marketplace?
Thank you, Jasmine. I think it's a great question, and just kind of keeping on from JP, if I will, innovation isn't new to Bermuda. I mean, it may look different going forward with the tech platforms that we have and what COVID has, I think, the gift that it has provided, while it has been a tragedy globally. But innovation has always been part of our, we talk about it as part of our DNA, if you will. If I think about what brought me personally to Bermuda over 17 years ago, coming from, at that time, New York City, many people thought I wouldn't stay, right? I needed that city energy. I needed access to capital, decision makers. 17 years later, I've been a part of 2 startups, and I think that tells a story of the fact that everything that New York represented at the time, or when I worked in London at the time, is represented here in Bermuda. And for me, in a way that was able to be more flexible, nimble, access to decision makers quicker, just more, flatter operating structures. And so, if you spend a little bit of time understanding Bermuda's history, way back to the, in the 80s, when the captive market was developed by, a gentleman, Henry Tucker, who said, I want to make this, the Switzerland of the captive market, right? And Bermuda was his chosen place. JP is right in the sense that sometimes we wait for crises to innovate in insurance, but that is a bit of how we fill the space and fill the need. And Bermuda's always done that. If you think about, then fast forward almost every 10 to 20 years, the formation of ACE and XL in the 80s. That was a direct response to clients, Fortune 100 clients that couldn't find reasonable coverage. And then you look at Hurricane Andrew, the class of 92, and what that, the capital shortage and the catastrophe in the US, and what that allowed Bermuda to then become with the class of 92. Then you look at 9/11, right? So that was a crisis, but that afforded opportunity for markets to form here quickly. Capital could flow. We have a world-class regulator. We have intellectual capabilities and talents in our people and our resources. And so that class was able to form. And so, fast forward, I joined the ranks in 2003 while I was already trading here in Bermuda from abroad. I joined the ranks, and like I said, I've been part of 2 startups. So innovation, I think, has been, like I said, part of our DNA. Matching risk to capital is what we do, and what we do really well. And we have all the supporting services that allow us to do that. And, if I think about what we've just gone through in a very small scale with COVID, we've tested and challenged, I think, even my own personal thoughts around work from home, and does that work in our market? We still are an insurance market, and I put us alongside banking and probably healthcare, business that's 100-year-old and has some ingrained beliefs in how we trade. We're a people business, and we believe in kind of that personal connection, and we trade on those relationships very heavily in Bermuda. We probably see and meet and are close to at least 2 or 3 times a year, 90+% of our clients from a Liberty perspective. But what I've found to be true is that we all have now kind of advanced degrees in video conferencing. And that's even down to my 8-year-old who just went through an exercise of, pivoting on a dime to homeschooling. So I think the barriers are coming down, and those are probably more psychological barriers to use in innovation and technology to kind of propel us further. But I think Bermuda is, because of the history that I've shared, really ripe to capitalize on that. And I think I always talk about our brand and what our brand is known for. To me, it's our capital, our capacity, and our talent. And we strive, and I know all of us on this panel and probably all of the other folks that you've chatted to over the last 5 weeks work extremely hard to protect that. And so everything we do is really thoughtful, not only around protecting what we have, because when you're 22 square miles, you understand the delicate balance of relationship and how globalization, may trade on against our market share and our positioning. So we protect what we have, but I think we fight incredibly hard to think about the future. And I think you have to do that when you're a small place. And I talk about punching above our weight. So I think the tools now that we'll be using, I think, again, access to capital gives those that are coming into the marketplace with real solutions. They want to, partner with folks that have proven capabilities. And I think Bermuda affords us just that.
Excellent. Thank you, Susan. And when you talk about, you've talked about protecting what we have and how intentional we are with that. In Bermuda, we're very fortunate that we have a financial services regulator that recognizes that works hard at protecting that brand and also understands the importance of enabling innovation. And so, George, I'm going to turn the conversation to you. Can you give us an insight into the BMA's innovation evolution, so to speak?
Thank you, Jasmine, and thank you for having me today. Let me just start by saying that the BMA has a great history of being responsive to market changes, and it's good that Susan has been, talking about that, where we started in the 80s with the captives, and I can really say that the authority, the Bermuda Monetary Authority, has been with the industry this whole time, and in fact, over the last decade, we have updated the Insurance Act every year since 2007, for example, when we adopted the risk-based framework for commercials, if you remember, as well as the creation of the special purpose insurer class back in 2009. And then since then, we have seen the Bermuda ILS sector grow into one of the biggest into the world now, alongside the captive sector. In the last 3 years, though, we have been particularly active in updating the legislation to prepare us for the emerging trends that we see in the market, such as the rise of artificial intelligence, machine learning, oracles, and as well as the distributed ledger technology. And so into 2018, we have created the Insurance Regulatory Sandbox and Innovation Hub, which allow companies to test their innovative ideas under the BMA's guidance. Also around the same time, the BMA has also built the first comprehensive regulatory framework for digital asset business, which I see is a good complement to the Insurtech revolution. In 2019, we took it a step further and introduced new classes such as the Insurance Marketplace Provider, which is a new category of intermediary, as well as the Class IIGB Insurer, which caters to digital native insurers and those that use digital assets in their business model. We also joined the Global Financial Innovation Network, or GFIN, which is an international forum of key regulators around the world to share knowledge and collaborate in facilitating innovation across the sectors. And this is on top of our usual active participation in established bodies like the IIS, EIOPA, and the US NAIC, which are also pushing a lot of initiatives lately in regards to innovation in insurance. And all these efforts were really made possible by the creation of an innovation working group, which is an internal think tank here in the BMA to look at emerging trends and opportunities out there and act on it. And then finally, we have formalized all of this by resourcing a dedicated team within the authority to push for its innovation initiatives. And really, that's how my small team has been created to focus just for that.
Excellent, George. And I think that goes back to what Susan said about intentionality. You usually don't see regulators and innovation side by side, but the fact that you have a working group that is intentionally looking towards this topic and pursuing that it speaks volumes for the BMA. I'm going to pivot it back to Susan again. So now that we've discussed kind of an overview, how has Bermuda and Bermudian reinsurers and insurers responded to Insurtech developments?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I look at that twofold. So there's an internal, I think, conversation happening and change happening. And then there's an external partnership or use of Insurtech. And so I think the low-hanging fruit or probably certainly what's necessary is the internal. If you look at insurance, I talked about our legacy of being a 100-year-plus old business, certainly from a Lloyd's and perspective, we have high operating costs. And so understanding that, and Lloyd's has put out Blueprint 2.0, and there is real intentionality, to use your word, around the fact that, we really need to be smarter, quicker, faster, and more streamlined in what we do. And so there are legacy components to why that becomes cumbersome and difficult. And so some take perhaps a view that, we'll keep what we have and continue to Band-Aid, link systems and computers together and technology to be able to move forward. I think we're getting to a real tipping point in where some companies, certainly the more established, are having to say, look, startups can come in with a very, a small budget because technology is cheaper, quicker, and faster, and do things that are extraordinary. And so you're having to really look internally, and certainly my job as a COO is having to, improve efficiency. Obviously, that's direct correlation of driving expense ratios, but that's really talking about the health of our business, right? And that's talking about the future sustainability. And so we need to use technology to do that. So we're enhancing also risk analysis, right? So really having intentional conversations around what does the underwriter of the future mean? What does that look like? What does the broker of the future mean, right? With all the M&A activity that we're seeing in our marketplace, that conversation is high on the list. And so for us, as the risk bearer, if you will, and putting our capital at risk, we have to be very intentional about where we're going and how we're not only looking at a 1 to 5 year plan, but really what's the 10 to 20 year plan. And so we know that with that, it takes not only the technology shift, but a mind shift along the way with what our underwriters are currently doing and how they're doing it. And we need to enable that, right? So we talk about matching risk to capital, but we also need to match technology to that risk and do that better and more efficient. And so, and at the center of it, we need to think about, because Bermuda is, I talked about our client relationships, we have to be customer centric, right? So we have to be extremely thoughtful about what we do, and is it aligned with what our clients' needs are? And so we talked about that window of being reactive to a crisis. I think we need to shorten that window. And when we're talking to our clients and meeting with them face to face or virtually in the new world, right? Thinking about gaps that they present in their business. And I think Bermuda, has an example of being able to do that, right? And we've had startups as a result. So that's the inward focus, I think, that we're seeing, right? So smarter operating platforms. Jonathan is on the call. Liberty has partnered with them, and we've launched, it's publicly available information, right? So we're along a journey of talking about a digital trading platform. And we think that's the right thing to do, not only for our business, but for our customers. And so there is that inward focus happening. I think the external piece that we'll start to see is how that technology influence piece, right? So how is Insurtech making us smarter about the risk? And that's that competitive edge, right? And thinking about the assets that we hold. I always, when I sat in the underwriting seat, I'm a reformed underwriter and a broker, so in full disclosure, you know, we have all of this data, but is it really useful information? And I think we're on that journey now of really taking data and making it useful information for our underwriters, right? And doing that, not at the, and not making an arduous process, right? Not meaning that clients have to submit more. You know, we're using drone technology, we're using AI, machine learning to have policy contract and policy certainty and the ease of distributing our product into the customer's hands quicker. And we'll use digital trading platforms going forward to do that, and access to third-party data to bring it into our environment to make us, again, have that competitive edge. So I think, you know, again, there's internal work that still needs to be done. And I think we're on the journey to do that across Bermuda. And because, again, because we're a small island and we've already gone through use of outsourcing models, technology is the next play, right? We have to have very honest conversations with ourselves around that, and then be very intentional about how we change the use of data and risk analysis so that we can really provide solutions to our customer, in my opinion, quicker.
Excellent. Thank you, Susan. And when you discuss competitive edge, and maybe we can touch on this later, but it's also a competitive edge to attract talent. So when you think about how you are attracting that new wave of talent, incorporation of that digital platform will do that. And so JP, that's a great segue to yourself. You know, I know that Ed Broking, as Susan recently just said, that they've launched the Trade Ed platform, and I would love for you to talk more about how BGC partners, what is their commitment to investing in technology, and what does that look like also with the incorporation of Ed Broking?
Well, if you go on the BGC Partners website, you know, the top of the screen is talent and technology. Obviously, they're more focused on the capital market side, but their investment into the insurance industry is you know, purely focused around that. It's all about taking capital market technology that has been proven and is, as you said in your introduction, you know, probably 10, 15 years ahead of the insurance industry, and seeing what elements of that can come into the insurance and reinsurance marketplace. So our commitment is total, and we're, you know, very deliberately doing that in Bermuda. I loved Susan's comment around a capital, capacity, and talent. That's the reason we chose Bermuda to go live with our Ed Broking office out there, which in truth is the model office for our group. Everything in it is being challenged. Not only the way we trade with underwriters, the way we interact with our clients, and indeed the internal processes that we follow. So it's great to have what is a new office, rapidly growing, super exciting, hiring some fantastic talent that we can use as a model office in a marketplace which we think is, you know, is clearly steeped in fantastic insurance history, but has also got this you know, fantastic track record of innovation in the past. Most importantly for us is effectively keeping the ball moving. Our launch of Trade Ed is literally the start of the project, and so many of these things are deemed the launch is the end. Not at all. That's the start of the project. So we're very excited about some things we're going to do later in the year. We've partnered with a fantastic data visualization company, which we will announce, we hope, towards the end of the third quarter. We have a great sign up of carriers. We're integrating with some clients. We hope that we'll be able to have a large and complex risk that will flow directly from a client in the States straight through the Ed Broking office to a carrier direct, which has never been done before. And of course, you know, the key to this is always, you know, the proof of the pudding's in eating. There are a lot of startups, fintechs, insurtechs out there that don't have liquidity. So we're in the unique place that, because we own, you know, a number of different insurance and reinsurance brokers under a number of different brands, we have liquidity, we have premium, we have clients. So if we can add that to our technology expertise, we really think we're well positioned to succeed. And so Bermuda will benefit. So we're super excited about it.
Thank you, JP. So Pete, not to leave you out of this conversation. And I'm really excited to have you on, not just from the legal standpoint, but more so because you see everyone and anything that comes in to the island that's looking to set up and start. And so from global financial institutions to startups, those companies are looking to leverage technologies and kind of change the status quo with their innovative products and services. So what trends are you seeing and what do you see when you look at the new entrants that are coming into Bermuda?
Yeah, thanks, Jasmine. I mean, we've already covered what I guess the incumbents are doing, which ultimately is all geared towards providing and distributing existing services on a more efficient basis, so that I guess underwriters can have time to think and think about how they can cover more business in a better way. So automation, using AI just to get rid of that noise, certainly is how those guys are doing it. And I'll briefly comment on, you just got to look at the level of investment that these incumbents are making. I mean, you saw that Multistrat today, there was news of how they've used a risk-based platform to place a $55 million layer in a collateralized insurance deal. You see Hudson Structured, they're always investing, and Sompo invested $500 million in Palantir recently. So the investment is real, and it's all geared towards obviously maximizing the potential. What's interesting to me is looking at sort of how Insurtech's been used to date. And I'd give two examples, which are Lemonade, which is, I guess, the first I certainly thought of as the big insurer, Geico. Look, great companies, cool app. I went on earlier to sort of run an auto application, got a quote in 5 minutes. It works, it's really cool. But that's a distribution model, right? They don't really sell anything new. Lemonade sells, renters and homeowners insurance, and Geico sells car insurance along with boats and all sorts of other things I noticed. But what's really cool for me is all the startups and what they're doing, because it's a popular phrase, but it's real. This creative destruction that these guys are using. They're reinventing the risk. They are looking at providing lines of coverage that previously haven't existed, or they're dissecting existing lines, and they are drilling down to change product, to change price, to change the risk, change the mitigation, change the focus, like social insurance, climate change. This is where we're going. This is what's really important to most of us. And the way they're doing it is, understanding those data sets that have already been covered by JP and Susan. But they're doing it in a pretty cool way. I mean, why should Californian wildfire be a statewide product? Why can't you insure a zip code? Why can't you just buy 2 months of coverage instead of 12 months? And it seems pretty basic, but actually the insurance industry has moved relatively slowly to embrace this. But I see this is going to change really quickly, and I liken it to, I'm a Michael Lewis fan, and I think of his book Flash Boys, talking about algorithmic trading. And I thought, wow, that's really cool. And, that's going to be a thing for the future. And it's like 10 years ago, maybe say 10% of trading was algorithmic. It's now like 80. It's huge. And we've really got to jump on that, because if we don't, the capital markets will. But, fundamentally, I think what we're seeing, and I'd love to give a shout out, just to sound like a millennial, to a couple of clients later, maybe, where they just recognize that the stochastic model is not broken, but it's maybe in need of updating. And, being able to exercise a greater manipulation of those data to come up with something new, to come up with a cool product. It means insurers can sell more, they can diversify, and clients are going to get more of what they want, something that's a bit more bespoke. What's in it for these guys I'm seeing when I'm talking to them is, the first mover advantage. I mean, look at Bloomberg. Not revolutionary, but being able to put all of that technology in one place that's updated in real time. Not just the financial results for for Michael, but just the usefulness. It's everyone uses it. When I was an underwriter, I had a Bloomberg terminal on my desk, and I'm sure all these guys do too. So yeah, that's what I'm seeing. It's unfortunate that a lot of these startups don't sort of get to the finish line, and there is assistance out there in the form of incubators. But I really see this wave is gonna move extremely quickly.
Thank you, Pete. And it's interesting being at the BDA in a business development role. The cool stuff is all the stuff that I'm seeing during COVID, right? So it's kind of a jaded view, but the cool stuff coming through, and the individuals that are interested, and the possible classes of 2020 and 2021, those are the conversations. Those are the people that are ready to take those risks during and after COVID. So you don't really say cool and insurance in the same sentence, but since we're in the industry, I think we can use it, right? So George, I'm gonna turn it back to you, and let's drill down and talk specifically, and just click, I think we can click two more slides forward. And we're gonna just look at specifically, yeah, thank you. Look at specifically the regulatory environment that the BMA has set up specifically for Insurtech developments.
Sure. So while I believe that our existing traditional classes have, some flexibility embedded in it, one of the highlights in our efforts to support innovation is the introduction of Sandbox and Innovation Hub. And let me start by outlining the benefits of this program, both to the market and as well as to us as regulators. So here in this slide, I'm just wanna relay the point that for the innovators, for the companies, the startups, or even the incumbent players as well, having the Sandbox and Innovation Hub tracks allows them a safe and transparent environment to test their ideas. And we do this by really having them, have a clear goalpost and objective at the start. And with that, knowing the risks that are out there, we are able to put the necessary safeguards that are necessary for them to really just operate seamlessly and as safe and as transparent as possible. So we do that by having some flexibility in our regulatory requirements. So we do that depending on the business model that they have. Innovators get constant and ongoing regulatory guidance from us. So in that way, there's a fluid communication between the authority and the startup companies, and in that way, we also determine what are the implications of their proposed activities in terms of regulatory impacts, and all these benefits really result into reduced regulatory uncertainty, time to market their ideas to their target segments, as well as hopefully easier access to financing. When they are starting up, capital may be scarce, but being in a regulatory sandbox allows them that some assurance that they are being guided by a world-class regulator, for example. And then if we move to the next slide, this is just now the benefits for us as regulators. So if you don't mind going to the next slide. Okay. Yeah. So this slide is just really to emphasize as well, the benefit to us as a regulator by being out there with the innovators. It keeps us up to date with what is going on, what are the emerging trends, and so that we are able to tailor, the solutions, the regulatory approach to these companies. And then, in the long run, we are, these inputs, feedback, and the experience that we have out of the sandbox also allows us to continuously improve our legislative framework. It allows us to, bring in enhancements and to really modernize how the legislative framework is outlined for the insurance industry. And if you go further to the next slide, I would like here to really just hone in. Hopefully the audience will indulge me a bit here. Just really outlining the differences. How does a sandbox company or application compare with an innovation hub company? So on the sandbox, so just click on. The sandbox is a temporary license in itself, whereas the Innovation Hub has no license required. Our regime doesn't necessarily regulate technology, for example. So in that case, the Innovation Hub would be the perfect place for them. Whereas for those that fall under our licensable activity, in this instance, the insurance companies, intermediaries, the sandbox would be where they would fall under. So on the sandbox, if you click further, we have divided this into a few classes. So now we have a parallel class for insurers, the risk-bearing entities. We have general business, IGB, and ILT for long-term insurers, as well as innovative intermediaries. So that would cater to the agents, the brokers, the managers, as well as this new class that we have introduced, which is the marketplace providers. The Innovation Hub will really give us a view of what's happening out there. So, for example, service and tech vendors can come to us if they want some regulatory guidance, as well as those that are, not yet ready for their proof of concept, or those that are not yet ready to do live testing, for example. So the Innovation Hub and Sandbox, gives both the opportunity wherever they are. So in other words, the authority is willing to meet these companies, these innovative companies, in whatever stage they are in their process. And then my last slide really focuses on the process. Once they decide that Bermuda is a great place for them, and these tracks are what fits their model, I would just like to really outline here the process. So both Sandbox and Innovation Hub start with a discussion, so some presentation to the BMA for the example, what their idea is, how unique or innovative the solution is, why is it not seen to the market. All that process comes at the beginning. So they have that talk. Sometimes they go through with you just they come. So once we are happy where to put them, either in the Sandbox or in the Innovation Hub track, Sandbox companies would have to register as a Bermuda company and then apply for license with us. Whereas the Innovation Hub, there is no license required, as previously mentioned, but there is still some formal vetting that happens, because of course we don't want to be dealing with the bad guys out there. So once they are going to be on on this really dynamic dialogue within the BMA to give the necessary guidance depending on their business model. And then at the end of that journey, they would either graduate, and for Sandbox companies, this can mean a change to a full license if they have a successful proof of concept, or they can also exit, depending if it's a failure or not. They can exit the Sandbox. And then for Innovation Hub, they can either offer these products to the insurance industry, or they can apply for a Sandbox license, depending on where they are. So that, in a sense, is a very condensed version of how I would explain the process of the Innovation Hub and the Insurance Regulatory Sandbox.
Thank you, George. And usually we would leave questions to the end, but I think we can pose this one while you are talking about it. What is the typical level of engagement with the regulator throughout the application process and during the period of operating in the Sandbox or Innovation Hub really look like?
Sure, so that's a good question. And really what we have designed here is because we now have a dedicated team within the BMA to cater to those applications. You do have that benefit of like face-to-face and very, very close interaction within the BMA. So I mentioned earlier, part of the process is the registration of Bermuda company within the Register of Companies. So what happens is when they come here in Bermuda and discuss their ideas, even before they incorporate, they can come to us and discuss whether this is viable. Is this something that fits in the Bermuda market? For example, is the Sandbox the best way to do this, or are there other ways to go around this? So we have that conversation beforehand. so that they don't go to the register and, you know, incorporate, and then when they backtrack, they get, you know, they get denied with their application. So we offer that. So we do have a pre-application process, which is very informal. And, you know, we give as much guidance depending on where they are. Some companies they come very prepared with, you know, capital backing, with a very clear business plan. Some are still really trying to play along what they have in mind. So we cater to both. We don't discriminate. And what we really give them is that dedicated, you know, resources within the authority. Of course, you can just call up anybody in the BMA, but having this dedicated team that I have gives them that, you know, time and resources that they will need to proceed.
Perfect. Thank you, George. And I'm going to ask you one more question. This is the BMA's time to shine. But compared to other jurisdictions, you know, how do we compare from a regulatory perspective, and what makes Bermuda different, just specifically when talking about that?
Sure. And that's a very good question. And let me begin by emphasizing that the Bermuda market is unique. I'm sure some of my panelists would agree in that we cater to a number of subsectors within the bigger insurance industry. But here in Bermuda, we have a combination of wholesale, commercial reinsurance, property cat, mostly excess and surplus lines. In other words, you know, complex risk that you don't really see outside. And we also, on the side, we nurture a stable and growing captives and ILS sectors, which sort of, you know, solidify our position as the risk capital of the world. And because of this, while other markets like the US, UK, or Asia, you know, focus on improving customer experience and process improvements in the retail market, the bulk of what we have seen in Bermuda is looking at technologies such as AI and, you know, DLT, for example, to improve their decision-making process, as well as solving some of the inefficiencies in the ecosystem as a whole. So we have here Jonathan on Ed Broking, you know, talking about, you know, making a seamless insurance placement process for the industry. We also have, you know, underwriting complex risks, or, you know, matching capital to, and finally matching this capital to this risk, as Susan mentioned earlier. And this uniqueness carries over as to how we regulate both the traditional players and innovative companies. So as you can imagine, this is a tough balancing act that we do at the BMA to ensure that we remain relevant to the changing times, you know, while supporting a robust regime for our commercial sector. You know, we want to maintain that Solvency II equivalence that we have achieved, and as well as the NAIC qualified jurisdiction status, you know, making us at par with top tier jurisdictions.
Perfect.
Yes.
Thank you, George. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I'm just gonna segue to Pete really quickly. You know, on the back of what George has said, we've talked about this several times, and, you know, when you look at Bermuda and you look at Silicon Valley, for those that are listening that are investors and Insurtech startups, how would you explain the benefits of domiciling Bermuda versus a Silicon Valley, for instance?
I mean, if we look at Silicon Valley, obviously they're the world experts in tech. I mean, there's some pretty accomplished tech people in Bermuda, but we're not a tech leader. But we are, I'd say, a reinsurance, an insurance technology leader, and that technology changes a lot over time. I mean, the problem is you can invent a really cool app or a really, you know, a wonderful new product, but you don't know what the word seedant is if you're out in Silicon Valley. So there really needs to be a marriage of the tech origination with the risk management. And, you know, without wishing to oversell Bermuda, I mean, if you compare it to the US, say, where you have, I don't know, 50 licenses you need to get, you don't have that here, you just got one. If you look at the UK, and I don't want to dismiss my brothers and sisters in my home city of London, but it's a rigid system. It's pretty slow moving. And the one takeaway that, you know, I've learned in all of this, especially with startups, is, you know, they're running out of money. They're running out of money quickly. So you really need a regulatory system that's moving quickly, and can actually have that dialogue in real time, respond quickly, be able to give a license quickly. You know, we have a system here that's, you still got to be appropriately capitalized. You still got to be able to back up your product, but you can do it much easier here. You can log that you have before you get your license is massively advantageous. Plus, you know, we have these two licenses. The thing we used to sell with the IIGB license, which was the sandbox license, was, isn't it cool? It's in the sandbox. You've got the stabilizers on. You know, when you're ready, you can take them off. And clients were saying to us then, I don't want the stabilizers. I want to get on with it. So that's why we now have the new license. And that, you know, that happened pretty quickly. We didn't need to tell the BMA very often about that. Plus the innovation hub, which is a, you know, it's a great addition. But above all, you know, the thing I really need to remark upon is the ecosystem here. I've never been to a place where there are so many actuaries and so many really clever numbers people, you know, with skills I don't have. And they're all here and they're all used to, you know, managing risk and selling products to allow their clients to manage risk, and on, you know, a really big scale. I always compare it, you know, to Lloyd's. Lloyd's is still relatively, there's, you know, small lines taken by all the insurers. You've got some insurers here that take some really big, but very well educated and informed risks. So, you know, I would love to introduce these two disparate communities. If you want to hit me up, I'd love introducing people. You know, we really want these tech guys in California and elsewhere to be meeting guys in Bermuda, because I really think they can, you know, produce these products that we're all working so hard to make happen. And let's say we're already seeing, you know, a number that have gotten going, and there's only going to be more. Absolutely.
Thank you, Pete. That was great. So Susan, turning the conversation back to you, let's talk about opportunities. You know, what does Insurtech present when it comes to opportunities, and what can traditional Insurtechs even learn from that, and vice versa?
Yeah, I think, you know, it's, I want to say endless, but I do mean that, because at the end of the day, I think we're just at the beginning stages still. You know, everyone has talked about and given specific examples on where we've seen the influence thus far. You know, I spoke about, you know, migrating off legacy systems, right? You need new technology to be able to do that when you're doing it smart and planning for the future. We're doing operating model and process redesign, right? You're not doing that in a vacuum. You're doing that in partnership with new technology that is allowing you to create things so much faster than we've ever done before. I mean, we launched a new operating model in my shop, and we did that from start to finish in less than 4 months. It's like literally unheard of, right? And that's with project teams that were global and around the world. And so you're able to do that quite quickly. And so again, you know, I'm AI and the concept of machine learning, you know, those are all things that I thought would be things I need to know, but probably something that would be in my son's lifetime. But I'm seeing it now in living proof real time. And so we're seeing it change our business. And like I said, change our operating model and how we connect in our distribution model, which we've talked about. But I think the thing that Bermuda is really going to succeed with and continue to succeed with is moving from a product-based marketplace to really a service-based marketplace, right? And thinking about insurance and how we connect with our customers, and starting to view everything as a service, right? You can buy products around the world. You can buy products, you know, Peter mentioned a few, right? Lemonade, it wasn't a new product, right? But it was the service that they were providing with the customer that maybe gave them an advantage, right? And so starting to think about our journey and being a service provider as an industry. And I think, again, I speak about our history all the time, and we do that well because it's what we've always done. And I think it's what you always have to do when you just can't rest on your laurels, and you're, again, a small place with a very talented group of people. And then you can come together and create a change a lot quicker than other jurisdictions. And so I think, without repeating, I think we're seeing that, and we're proving that out.
Thank you, Susan. And I'm going to pull in Pete. You know, briefly, could you touch on this question around opportunities?
Yes. Yeah, this is my opportunity to shout out. I mean, just giving a limited number. I mean, insurers are writing different things, right? And I mean, a client of ours is Kettle, who have come up with this really cool way of analyzing and distributing Californian wildfire risk. You know, and I touched on sort of what they do. You don't ask me how they do it. They're way too clever for me to understand. But, you know, it's much more bespoke. It's much more ultra personalized, dynamic pricing. All of these things. These are different things in this market. And, you know, just offering that kind of selection is great for all parties, both insurers and clients. It's not a competing product, but, you know, ChainNat's a distributed ledger platform for, you know, the placement of risk and, you know, the settling of claims, just for the whole life cycle of risk to all be locked down in a blockchain kind of platform. There are other platforms out there. Obviously, platforms are the way forward. And just having that sort of singular reference point for, you know, brokers, clients, insurers, reinsurers is with smart contracts is obviously really helpful. And then you got, you know, stuff like, I mean, Gemini set up a crypto captive. So, you know, it's still an insurance product, but it's covering something different. And, you know, it's that, and say finding insurance solutions for intellectual property valuations, which has been a very long discussion on this island for a number of years, to meet a need to give companies which nowadays are mainly tech in terms of value, but they're not allowed to give value to that technology on their balance sheet. So the clients are moving in and have different demands. They have, you know, different capital structures, and it's really important that insurers are moving to meet that. And, you know, I see it not just from our clients that I've just named. You know, it's across the board. This is the dynamism of the world, and insurance is, I'm pleased to say, is keeping up.
Thank you, Pete. And I think we can talk about this subject all day, all of us. I've had individual discussions with you all about it, and we're extremely passionate about it, which really is really great. But, you know, just to make sure that we have time for just a few questions, if possible, let's round it up. And I'd like each of you, and I'm going to ask each of you, what does the future of Insurtech look like? I'm going to position this first to JP.
Well, I think, you know, you would be difficult to listen into this panel and not realize that it's bright and it's super exciting. I think we could pick up a number of the issues. I love Susan's comment around service. You know, Lemonade's a great example of that. Same product, different service. Actually, I thought Pete's comment around algorithmic trading, I mean, that's something very close to BGC's heart. You know, I think every carrier having a stock picker versus a market tracker strategy is where we'll see the future. Anything that, you know, collects data now will be able to give, you know, greater understanding. So I think, you know, verticalized marketing, I think parametrics, you know, exactly, you know, insurance when you need it, all those sort of phrases we all know are all going to become much more realistic as we move forward. So I think it's a super bright future. I think Bermuda's positioned itself, you know, really, really well to take advantage of that. But just perhaps a note of caution, you know, the proof is always in delivery. There's a lot of money being invested. There's a lot of great thinking, but it has to be delivery. And the bit that worries me is when you see a digital NGA running a combined ratio of 170, or a distribution platform with one client. You know, they've done two trades. So I think there needs to be a legitimate sort of litmus test for all these. Make sure you're doing the basics right, but also I think that the passion that comes through and the diversity of thought from the individuals involved in these startups and Insurtech, usually much younger, perhaps certainly than me, much more diverse. I think that's a fantastic thing for our industry generally.
Absolutely, that was great. No other way to sum that up. Susan, I'm gonna pose a question to you. What does the future of Insurtech look like?
I think for me, the biggest change I believe we'll see is it won't be a siloed approach, right? So there won't be Insurtech on one side and kind of traditional insurance on another. I think whether it's through, pure investment, M&A activity, or probably what we'll see more of is really the affiliation and the partnership and the collaboration, right? And so the view that, and I've always been a firm believer that you need a corner of your balance sheet for research and development. And that's how you continue to evolve. And Bermuda has done that, right? But you need to do that. And the innovation needs to be planned around what's the customer need that you're serving. And you can't do that in silos, right? Because what we think a good idea may be, or what an Insurtech company may think a good idea may be, right? To JP's point, it may be either A, a long life cycle, or B, you may wind up with one client, but that does not indeed change a market or beget a future. And so I think the combining of those relationships and really the partnership and the collaboration is what I think we'll see.
Awesome. Pete, I'm going to bring it to you. What does the future of Insurtech look like?
I mean, I'm a terrible poker player, and I tipped my hand earlier. But I think the future is here now in many ways. In a pithy statement, I would just say I can imagine that with the assistance of Insurtech, obviously there'll be a sell of a lot more insurance to meet currently unmet needs, whether that be the protection gap that we're talking about, or just insurance for stuff that we don't, currently insure. Whether it be ride sharing with a friend, or you're going to go down a ski slope and you need insurance for that one run. Highly specialized, tailored, and cost-effective solutions with an overall increase in spread of insurance for all sorts of different things is what I see for the future.
Thank you, Pete. And George, can you comment from the aspects of the regulator? Obviously, you're positioned to look towards the future constantly. So what does the future of Insurtech look like from a regulator standpoint?
Sure, and really from our point of view is we see them. We see them because of this avenue that we have provided for the innovators, and a lot of them are really focused on, for example, not just automating, making the processes better, but there's a lot of revolutionary changes there. For example, the convergence of financial markets to the risk transfer business future as well. So us as a regulator, we also have to evolve in that, my department, insurance supervision, shouldn't just really be experts in insurance regulation, but understanding financial markets, the capital markets, and technology on top of that, so that we see everything and we are able to provide regulation that makes sense to this business model. So we are there not as a hindrance to their success, but actually as partners, as enablers to these companies.
Thank you, George. And I'm reviewing the questions, and a lot of these have been discussed, and we've touched on a lot today. So I think we've answered a lot of the questions that have been posed, and we are kind of at time at this moment. So I just want to take the opportunity to thank you all for engaging in this discussion today. It has been great. And as a former underwriter, I am so passionate about the space, and I feel so invigorated just when we have these discussions about allowing, key individuals within the sector to do their jobs. And so to focus on what is actually important, and that's underwriting, and that's broking, and that's really looking at the talent and what you do and executing on that. So thank you all for your time. This is the last one, and I'm excited to close the door on it, but also I leave myself innovated and inspired by our sector and by our jurisdiction. We just have a wealth of talent and expertise, and I'm so grateful to be a part of that as a Bermudian as well. So thank you for your time. And Justin, I'm just gonna take it back to you and tell you that I will miss you.
Feelings mutual.
And you can close us out.
Thank you again, Jasmine. You did a great job moderating and hosting. A copy of this webinar will be archived on Risk Knowledge on Opus Ed within one business week. Visit RIMS.org for more information. On behalf of RIMS, it has been a wonderful experience to present this series with the BDA. We look forward to more successful collaborations, both virtually and in person. Thank you all. Stay safe.